does the USA have need of Judah? But Judah has need of the USA, has need of Manasseh. And America became great in the to help the state of Israel, or rather that was one of the reasons, not the only reason, but it was one of the reasons why divine providence gave America the strength and the power and the abilities that it has in order to use them to help Judah, to help the tribe of Israel, the tribes of Israel to return, to prepare the way to set up the state of Israel. And you find in the Bible that Joseph, the progenitor, the ancestor of the tribes of Joseph, of Ephraim and Manasseh, that Joseph also became a ruler over Egypt in order to assist his brothers. And that was the reason why he was given the power and the influence that he had in ancient Egypt, in order to help his fellow brothers, to help his family, even though his family did not recognize him. And so we see the same case holds now for the USA in a similar position of Joseph, and they should fulfill the role of Joseph, because that is why it was set up as it was. And the very division of the 10 tribes from Judah was for a divine purpose, as it says in 1 Kings 12 verse 15, for the cause was from the Lord, it says. The Israelites, the 10 tribes, were to become a light to the Gentiles. See Isaiah 42:6, 49:6, whereto it is mentioned that I am a confederation of the peoples. And the 10 tribes were destined to help rebuild the land of Israel, as it says in Isaiah 49:8. In an acceptable time I have heard from you, in the day of salvation I have helped you. I will preserve you and give you as a covenant to the people, to restore the earth, to cause them to inherit the desolate heritages. And this last section, to restore the earth, in Hebrew is Lahakim Eretz, or to establish the land. And elsewhere we have interpreted this or explained this to me. And one of the features of the tribes of Israel, especially the section belonging to Joseph, was to establish new countries, to establish other lands, to enable other lands to exist. And they did do that. The British, for instance, were colonizing people, and they established several countries, such as Australia, New Zealand, the USA, Canada, South Africa, and other areas, Jamaica and other areas. The British set up all these countries, hundreds of countries in effect. But out of their own kith and kin, such nations as Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the USA, and a portion of South Africa. And this was a quality of this, was a characteristic of this, and this is true. This was an ongoing feature of what they would do. But in addition to this, it has a pertinent application, especially to the helping to establish the land of Israel. This may be simply a continuation of this chapter 49. Chapter 49 in Isaiah. For instance, 49:14 speaks of Zion and Judah being comforted for her losses and degradation and restored to the kingdom. In other words, the verse has several applications, as we find many times in the Bible, and one of the qualities of this verse, of biblical verses in general, is that they are ongoing principles that are always applicable in several areas, but especially towards the end time they will have a specific applicability. And so too we find that the applicability of the 10 tribes in the end times would be to help Judah re-establish the land of Israel. And they had become what they had become in order to do what they have to do, as it says in Genesis 18 verses 18 to 19, and concerning Abraham, the forefather of the Israelite nations. It says that Abraham was to become a great and mighty nation, in order that all the nations in the earth should be blessed in him, and that he do justice and judgment. The Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him. In other words, first Abraham was to become a great and mighty nation, and then all the nations in the earth should be blessed in him. And then further on, the blessings that God had promised to him would come upon him as a reward for what he had done. So first of all, he receives a portion of the blessings, but this portion of the blessing is partly a down payment of what he will do later. But not only a down payment, but also an enabling means. A means is something that means through which he will be enabled to do even more, and by virtue of what he does even more, he will receive an even greater blessing. We often find this in Scripture. In other words, you are given what you are given. Every person is given what is given. It's given his money, it's given his health, it's given his personality, it's given whatever gifts he has, and sometimes even whatever inhibiting factors he has with it. Sometimes even the very faults in the character or the physique or whatsoever in the way a person is built are given to him and able to enable him to do what he has to do along the specific path which divine providence has foreordained for him. The person should realise this and realise that he is as he should be, as God wanted him to be, as he would have wanted to be if he had have known all of the options that are open to him. So everyone has to do what they have to do, and one of the things which the Bible indicates that the USA has to do is to help the state of Israel, to help the Jewish people in establishing the state of Israel. And in the end times we are told, Rabbi Kook and all explains that the Jews had to go into exile to the end times in order to refine themselves and avoid the necessary barbarity that was required to function as a nation in the past. They will return to the land of Israel in the end times when the situation will have changed. Even if we don't agree with Rabbi Kook on every point, but on this instance he is describing historical reality. Judah was exiled, yet remained conscious of his ancestry, but without a country of his own. Joseph, meaning the 10 tribes in general, they lost consciousness of who they were, yet they retained countries of their own. Judah had a separate task in history, in divine providence. He was to keep the Torah, he was to do what he had to do, and to not to have a country of his own for a period of time, whereas the other nations would evolve naturally and through natural processes, and they would also descend into degrees of barbarity, of primitive attributes, of very fundamental aspects of existence that Judah to some degree was saved from, and the other tribes would eventually evolve upwards, as they did. They went through very hard periods and very basic formative epochs in their history, and but out of that they became nations and became great nations, and they should realise that they were made great nations for a purpose. Judah was saved this, even though Judah had to pay a price for being what he was. Now in the end times the situation has changed, as Rav Kook indicated, that Judah can return to his land. He does not have to go through the stages of evolution that the other nations did. He is saved from that, he evolved in a different way. Now he can apply his own natural characteristics and historical development to the building up of a new nation, which God willing he will succeed in doing. And because the enemies of all of the world, in effect a good portion of the world, especially the Arab nations, but also other countries, are antagonistic to Judah, and because of our geopolitical realities, Judah at the moment is in need of help. So to Joseph, who is able to help Judah, should now help him, should realise what the situation is and help Judah, because Judah is in need of the help, because he can be helped, because Joseph is able to help Judah, and because this is why this means of being able to help Judah was given unto Joseph, in order that he utilise it, that he employ it, that he use it in helping Judah. In other words, we have to do what we have to do, especially when we take into consideration that we are given the means to do it.